On April 8, 1994, the world was rocked by the shocking news of Kurt Cobain's death. The iconic lead singer and musician of Nirvana was found lifeless in his Seattle home, with a shotgun by his side and a note that seemed to seal his fate as the tragic grunge legend. But is it really just a clear-cut case of unaliving, or is there a darker, more sinister truth lurking behind the surface? Join me as we dive into the shadowy details and suspicious circumstances that have left many questioning the official story. From strange behavior in the days leading up to his death to forensic anomalies and controversial testimonies, we're about to uncover a narrative that challenges everything you thought you knew about the tragic end of Kurt Cobain. Stay tuned, because the truth might just be more twisted and more wicked than fiction. Hey dudes, welcome to the Weird and Wicked podcast, where we'll deep dive into the most bizarre and spine-chilling stories from around the world. I'm Rachel, your guide on this eerie adventure. Get ready to explore the most bizarre, unnerving, and unbelievable stories. From true crime and conspiracy theories to ghosts and cryptids, I'll be covering it all. Today we're unraveling the mysterious and very controversial death of Kurt Cobain, the iconic frontman of the band Nirvana. Was it unaliving like everyone has been led to believe, or something more sinister? Warning: this episode contains extremely sensitive topics, including self-harm and homicide. It is strictly intended for mature audiences only. Listener discretion is advised. Before we get into the story, I'd like to mention that if you find this video entertaining, interesting, or informational, please drop a like and tap that subscribe button down below. And please give the podcast a rating on Spotify, Apple Music, or whatever streaming platform you listen on. Before we dive into part 2 of our deep dive into the mysterious death of Kurt Cobain, let's do a quick recap of what we covered in part 1. So we started with some background on Kurt Cobain's life and his tumultuous relationship with Courtney Love, which provided us important context for understanding the events leading up to his tragic end. We explored the final months, weeks, and days of Kurt Cobain's life, highlighting the emotional, physical, and mental struggles he faced during that time. And then finally, we laid out the chilling discovery of Kurt's body in the greenhouse at his Lake Washington Boulevard home on April 8th, 1994. If you haven't already listened to part 1, I highly recommend going back and checking that out before you continue with this episode. We laid out a lot of groundwork that is crucial for understanding what comes next. Trust me, you won't want to miss any of the details, because today we'll be diving deeper into the investigation, the media frenzy, and the countless theories that have emerged in the aftermath of Kurt's death. So go ahead, take a moment to catch up, and we'll be here waiting for you when you're ready for part 2. Okay, so let's freaking dive in. So we kind of left off when I mentioned last time that I want to deep dive into the unaliving note. So his unaliving note has been a focal point of controversy and intrigue. The note found at the scene is addressed to Cobain's childhood imaginary friend, Boda, and I think that's how you pronounce it. I'm not 100% sure, but it's Boddah. So overall, the whole note reflects this deep detachment with the music industry and his own life, reflects this deep sense of discontent with the music industry and actually his own life too. However, it's the content and the overall formatting of the note that has sparked significant debate. And I'm sure if you know this case, you know what I'm talking about. So the top portion of the note, and I'm going to actually put a photo of it just so you can exactly see what I'm talking about. So the top portion, which is the most lengthy, long portion of it, pretty much reads as a farewell to his career and his fans, and expressing feelings of frustration and hopelessness. This section aligns with Cobain's known struggles and the pressures that he faced. And I'm actually going to read it word for word here in a little bit, but this top portion of the note doesn't really mention anything about passing on. It just talks about kind of his career and how he feels disconnected from the music industry, how he's not liking the music industry, how he's someone who he doesn't want to be anymore, and how he's letting his fans down, which is a very interesting unaliving note, if you ask me, because I'm pretty sure you wouldn't be worried about letting your fans down. Just keep that in your back pocket, because there's a reason why I think that this first portion of the note is talking about fans and his whole like music career and whatnot. So the bottom portion of the note, and I think it's like the last 4 lines, diverges in tone and handwriting, which is quite interesting, right? It appears more personal, addressing his wife, Courtney Love, and their daughter, Frances Bean. Experts and analysts have pointed out noticeable differences between the top portion and the bottom portions, suggesting that they may have been written at different times or maybe even under different circumstances. The handwriting in the concluding lines has been scrutinized, with some alleging that it does not match Cobain's usual script. This discrepancy has fueled theories that the note was altered or that the bottom portion was added by someone else, casting further doubt on the official narrative of unaliving. So yeah, the bottom 4 lines is directly addressing Courtney and Frances. Very different from the top portion, as you'll see here in a minute. The Soaked in Bleach documentary dives deep into these inconsistencies, presenting the perspective of private investigator Grant, who was hired by Courtney Love to find Cobain during his disappearance. Remember that from part 1? Grant's findings challenged the official ruling, highlighting anomalies in the suicide note and pointing to potential motives and suspects who might have benefited from Cobain's death. This documentary has played a crucial role in keeping the debate alive, urging viewers to reconsider the circumstances and seek a more comprehensive understanding of what might have transpired. And seriously, if you haven't seen Soaked in Bleach yet, you gotta go watch it. It's so freaking good. Okay, and like I said, I want to read the whole note. If you want to skip ahead, you've read it before, you don't give a shit, I'll put the timestamp up above and you can just skip ahead to further analysis and whatnot. But word for word, it goes. To Boda, speaking from the tongue of an experienced simpleton who obviously would rather be an emasculated infantile complainee. This note should be pretty easy to understand. All the warnings from the Punk Rock 101 courses over the years, since my first introduction to the, shall we say, ethics involved with the independence and the embracement of your community has proven to be very true. I haven't felt the excitement of listening to, as well as creating music along with reading and writing for too many years now. I feel guilty beyond words about these things. For example, when we're backstage and the lights go out and the manic roar of the crowds begins. It doesn't affect me the way in which it did for Freddie Mercury, who seemed to relish in the love and adoration from the crowd, which is something I totally admire and envy. The fact is, I can't fool you, any one of you. It simply isn't fair to you or me. The worst crime I can think of would be to rip people off by faking it and pretending as if I'm having 100% fun. Sometimes I feel as if I should have a punch-in time clock before I walk out on stage. I've tried everything within my power to appreciate it, and I do. God, believe me, I do, but it's not enough. I appreciate the fact that I and we have affected and entertained a lot of people. I must be one of those narcissists who only appreciate things when they're gone. I'm too sensitive. I need to be slightly numb in order to regain the enthusiasms I once had as a child. On our last 3 tours, I've had a much better appreciation for all the people I've known personally and as a fan of our music, but I still can't get over the frustration, the guilt, and empathy I have for everyone. There's good in all of us, and I think I simply love people too much. So much that it makes me feel too fucking sad. The sad, little, sensitive, unappreciative Pisces Jesus man. Why don't you just enjoy it? I don't know why. I have a goddess of a wife who sweats ambition and empathy, and a daughter who reminds me too much of what I used to be, full of love and joy, kissing every person she meets because everyone is good and will do her no harm. And that terrifies me to the point where I can barely function. I can't stand the thought of Frances becoming the miserable, self-destructive death rocker that I've become. I have it good, very good, and I'm grateful. But since the age of 7, I've become hateful toward all humans in general, only because it seems so easy for people to get along that have empathy. only because I love and feel sorry for people too much, I guess. Thank you all from the pit of my burning, nauseous stomach for your letters and concern during the past years. I'm too much of an erratic, moody baby. I don't have the passion anymore, and so remember, it's better to burn out than to fade away. Peace, love, empathy. Kurt Cobain. Frances and Courtney, I'll be at your altar. Please keep going, Courtney, for Frances, for her life, which will be so much happier without me. I love you. I love you. Okay. So, yeah, the next line, as you can see, the next section starts with Frances and Courtney. You can see the first chunk of text, he ends it by signing off. Peace, love, empathy, Kurt Cobain, he says. To me, that sure fucking sounds like I'm signing the end of the note. But then it continues. Frances and Courtney, I'll be at your altar. Please keep going, Courtney, for Frances, for her life, which will be so much happier without me. This is like more of what an unaliving note should sound like, right? I think we can all agree on that. The first section is what doesn't line up for me. He's talking in the beginning in the first section about how he's lost this excitement for creating music and going on stage and performing and whatnot. He mentions Freddie Mercury, who seemed to have loved the attention and the limelight and all that, and he wishes that he could feel that way. This is all very career oriented so far. He mentions he feels like he should have a punch-in time clock before he walks out on stage. He poses the hypothetical, why don't you just enjoy it? And he says, I don't know. He mentions about how his daughter is full of that innocent childhood spirit and how he wishes that she never becomes what he is today. He says, I don't have the passion anymore. And so remember, it's better to burn out than to fade away. Peace, love, empathy. Like, none of it has to do with unaliving, ending your life. So it's just so weird that the end is completely different, you know? We'll get into the technicalities like the handwriting of the note and even sort of the way that it's written. But for me, just the pure meaning of each section just says it all. Pretty sure he was about to quit and he didn't want to be this rock legend. He just wanted to live a normal life and be with his daughter, not having to worry about the trappings of fame and all this other bullshit that comes with it. So, yeah, that's just my thoughts. I don't think the top portion reads the same way that the bottom one does. And me personally, I think he's addressing his fans and he's pretty much stating that he's quitting his career. And he's like sad about it, knows that he's going to disappoint a lot of people, doesn't understand why he can't enjoy the limelight and all of that. So, yeah, let me know what you think down below because I don't know. That's just my take. The note found at the scene of Kurt Cobain's death remains one of the most hotly debated pieces of evidence in this case. For many, it represents a final farewell from a tortured soul, but for others, it raises more questions than answers. Critics of Courtney Love have long pointed to the content and the authenticity of the note as a cornerstone of their arguments, suggesting that it may not be as straightforward as it seems. One of the major points of contention is the apparent discrepancies in handwriting and tone throughout the note. Experts and analysts have examined the letter extensively, noting that the majority of it seems to focus on Kurt's disillusionment with the music industry and his desire to step away from fame. However, the final lines of the note, those that most directly reference unaliving, appear to differ significantly in style and content. The last few sentences seem to many as overly stereotypical of a suicide note, almost as if they were written to unmistakably convey the idea of unaliving. This stark contrast in tone has led some to theorize that these lines may have been added or altered by someone else after the fact. I believe this. It's not that hard to take a piece of paper that has already been written on it and just add a little bit down at the bottom. Rosemary Carroll, who was Kurt and Courtney's attorney, immediately found the note suspicious upon reviewing it. And this is someone very close to them who knows both of them on a very personal level. She remarked that it looked like a forgery, suggesting that someone may have copied Cobain's handwriting to create the appearance of an authentic message. Carroll's concerns further fueled the controversy, with some arguing that the bottom 5 lines of the note, those most explicitly suggesting unaliving, were too deliberate and almost over the top in their sentiment. To these critics, it felt like an effort to make sure the reader would interpret the note as a clear indication of unaliving, a move that some suggest could be a calculated attempt to make the note's intent undeniable. These suspicions around the note's authenticity have only intensified the debate, with some believing it implicates Love in a larger conspiracy. They argue that if the final lines were indeed forged, it could point to an intentional effort to manipulate the narrative around Cobain's death, casting a shadow over what many see as the truth. There's also some weird circumstances that also happened around this note that I'm not even going to go into because, again, if I talked about everything, we would be here for 30 episodes probably. I'm not even kidding. But if you want more detail about it, go watch Soaked in Bleach because they go in on this. Pretty much. Rosemary Carroll had possession of one of Courtney's backpacks, I guess, at the time. And with all these suspicions going around with her thoughts on the note, she decided to look a little bit inside of it. And she actually found pages of paper of what looked like to be handwriting practice. You know, like when a child is like learning to write, they'll practice A couple times and then B a couple times, C a couple times, etc. This is what she found in Courtney's backpack. Pretty freaking convenient that someone was practicing handwriting. And then there's these suspicions of this forgery on Kurt's suicide note. I don't like it. It's not adding up for me. And then maybe some people would argue, like, okay, maybe Frances Bean was practicing writing as a baby, you know? Not possible. She was 19 months old when Kurt died, so you can't convince me that she was practicing her writing at 19 months old. That's something you do in like kindergarten, first grade. So anyway, it was maybe Courtney, maybe it was Callie. Whoever it was, it's freaking suspicious. Okay, so with the note covered, like, you know, I still have so many questions and whatnot, but I need to keep this going because I know this is going to be a long ass episode. But if you want to keep talking about this, leave me a comment and we can discuss more because my head spins with this case, all of the different aspects and whatnot. But anyways, with the note covered, let's get into the actual forensic evidence that leads me, along with many others, to believe that Kurt was murdered. The forensic evidence surrounding Kurt Cobain's death has fueled speculation and debate for decades, with many pointing to peculiar details that cast doubt on the official ruling of unaliving. The gunshot wound, the positioning of the shotgun, the toxicology, and the report, and more, all present puzzling aspects that warrant closer examination. So let's go into them one by one. The gunshot wound and the shotgun positioning. Kurt Cobain's body was found with a fatal gunshot wound to the head, and the gunshot used in his death was positioned across his chest with the muzzle pointing towards his chin. This positioning raises immediate questions about the logistics of a self-inflicted gunshot wound under these circumstances. Handling a shotgun, pulling the trigger with the barrel in one's mouth, and having the gun then come to rest neatly across the chest seems mechanically challenging, if not impossible. This is especially questionable given Kurt's physical state at the time of his death. Forensic experts have debated whether it is plausible for Cobain to have managed this alone. Furthermore, reports indicate that the shotgun was not dusted for fingerprints until a month after Cobain's death. What? Excuse me? A month? Clearly, this was not even an investigation. When this test was finally conducted, investigators found that there were no legible fingerprints on the shotgun cartridge, or even the pen supposedly used to write the note. Excuse me? What again? Come again? I didn't quite hear you. This delay and oversight in the investigation process have been cited as potential inadequacies that call into question the thoroughness and accuracy of the findings. It just doesn't make sense to me. Why are they not testing this shit? And they're not even concerned a little bit that there is 0 fingerprints on anything. There should at least be fingerprints on the freaking pen that he used to write his note, right? But nope, no fingerprints on it. It's nuts. The only thing I can possibly think of, because I'm pretty sure that's the last thing you're worried about when you're about to commit unaliving, is to clean off the pen that you wrote your suicide note with. Yeah, because that makes a lot of sense. And then same thing with the gun. Pretty sure you can't even clean off the gun after you've done the deed. So it's just not adding up. The math ain't mathin'. So his medical records are private, but somehow information from the toxicology report got leaked. Reporters suspect from a source at the medical examiner's office. Perhaps the most controversial aspect of the forensic evidence is the toxicology report, which revealed a concentration of approximately 1.52 milligrams per liter of heroin in Kurt's bloodstream. For anyone unfamiliar with pharmacology, this number might not mean much on the surface. And it sure didn't to me because I don't freaking know how many milligrams is in a per liter of whatever of heroin in someone's bloodstream. However, when contextualized, it becomes a piece of evidence that speaks volumes. So, bear with me here because it kind of gets into the weeds, but I'm going to try to make it as simple as possible so everyone can kind of understand and get the context of this. Denise Marshall, a deputy coroner in Colorado, provides a compelling perspective on this. She has stated, quote, "When I saw the blood morphine results of the toxicology test, 1.52 milligrams per liter, I immediately said to myself, how could he have pulled the trigger? The logic here is simple. Heroin, once in the bloodstream, is converted to morphine. Lethal opiate levels can vary based on tolerance and body weight, but the generally accepted maximum lethal dose of heroin for a 150-pound male would result in a blood morphine level of approximately 0.5 milligrams per liter. At the time of his death, Kurt weighed around 115 pounds, suggesting that his lethal dose threshold would be even lower than the 150-pound male. So to put this into perspective, a typical 5 milligram heroin injection results in a blood morphine level of about 0.035 milligrams per liter. Even heavy users who might inject between 40 to 60 milligrams of heroin in one hit generally reach blood morphine levels of around 0.420 milligrams per liter. For Kurt to have a heroin blood level of 1.52 milligrams per liter, he would have had to inject around 225 milligrams of heroin, an extraordinarily high amount. So with all this in mind, Cobain's level of 1.52 milligrams per liter was more than 3 times the widely accepted maximum lethal dose. Not even just 3 times above your typical dose. This is 3 times as high as the maximum lethal dose. Some argue that Cobain could have remained alive for several hours after injecting such a high dose. But the real question is, could he have stayed conscious long enough to pick up the shotgun, position it, and then kill himself? With these levels of morphine in his system, it seems impossible. Let me know if you disagree on this because I'd like to see your point of view and what you think is going on here. I hate to be morbid here, but the only thing that I could think of that makes sense possibly in this situation is maybe he injected a ton of heroin, fell unconscious, and then maybe a few hours woke up and then proceeded to shoot himself. I don't know how that works, if it would work. I don't know if it's plausible or not, but it's the only thing that I could think of that maybe would sort of make sense. But like I said, I'm not even sure if that's possible. Like, would he have been in some sort of comatose state of a drug overdose after that much heroin and not woken up at all before death? Like, maybe you would wake up in a daze or something like that. I'm not even sure, but yeah, that's what I thought. Maybe. So just to review, the implications are significant. Many argue that such a high dose of heroin would have rendered Cobain physically incapable of performing the intricate actions required to shoot himself. Skeptics suggest that under such heavy influence, Cobain would have been too disoriented and physically impaired to carry out the act of suicide in the manner it occurred. Furthermore, the presence of diazepine or Valium, a benzodiazepine, in his system complicates the scenario even more. This combination of substances likely would have severely impaired his motor functions and decision-making capabilities. Given these conditions, many have questioned the narrative of Cobain's final moments, arguing that the forensic evidence points to an inability to execute the act of unaliving as described, let alone pull the needle out, take off the tourniquet, roll down his sleeves, and pack away his supplies in the cigar box that was found there. It's just impossible, I think. No one has been able to cite a case where someone with a high tolerance to heroin, just as Kurt did, taken a dose equal to Cobain and remained conscious for more than a few seconds. Let me say that again. No one has been able to cite a case where someone with a high tolerance to heroin took a dose equal to Cobain's and remained conscious for more than a few seconds. The anomalies in the forensic evidence don't end with the physical logistics and toxicology. Let's continue. So, the cadaveric spasm and shotgun shell discrepancy. Those familiar with the case may have heard of the term cadaveric spasm. This typically happens during a self-inflicted gunshot, but can still happen in homicide. It is a form of muscular stiffening that occurs at the exact moment of death, typically locking the hand around the object being held. Oftentimes, when the gun is moved from the victim's hand, their hand is still in the same position as if the gun was never removed. This does not purely prove unaliving, since this can happen in both instances, especially if someone were to have positioned Cobain's hand on the shotgun and shot him. The cadaveric spasm would have still occurred. One of the most puzzling forensic anomalies involves the position of the gun in his hand and the location of the shotgun shell. Seattle police reports indicate that Cobain was found with the shotgun upside down with his left hand grasping the barrel in a vice-like grip. This is the cadaveric spasm. The cadaveric spasm, as we stated, shows the exact orientation of the deceased at the exact moment of death. This all makes sense until you notate the spent shell casing. The shotgun shell was found on the left side of Cobain's body, while the exit chamber was on the right. Seattle police claimed that the gun flipped upside down when he fired, causing the shell to land on the left side. Yet, forensic experts argue that shotguns do not flip in this manner when discharged. The only plausible explanation for the shell's location is that it hit an obstruction and ricocheted, but no such obstruction was found at the scene. This discrepancy suggests the possibility that Cobain was not alone in the greenhouse at the time of his death. This is just crazy. How in the world is the Seattle Police Department gonna claim that a shotgun flips when you shoot it? Because it doesn't. It just straight up doesn't. If that was the case, I'm pretty sure a lot more injuries and deaths would be happening to random ass people just shooting guns for fun and whatnot. Let me tell you, it's not gonna flip out of your hands like a freaking fish jumping into the water again. It's gonna push you back, sure, but it's not going sideways and it's not flipping. Please explain why they would even say this. These forensic irregularities, and these aren't even all of them, ranging from the shotgun wound logistics and the toxicology levels to the lack of legible fingerprints and the mysterious shell placement, have kept discussions alive and suggest that a more comprehensive analysis is necessary to understand Kurt's death fully. The idea of foul play remains a chilling alternative to the official story. driven by these numerous inconsistencies and unanswered questions embedded in the forensic evidence. You can't tell me that you can immediately prove that this is an unaliving. There's enough evidence to at least consider this a death investigation, not immediately a suicide, not immediately a homicide either. Like, we're just saying that this needs more investigation. The questions have never been answered, and it's just not fair. If it wasn't Kurt Cobain, it would be the same damn thing. For many who question the unaliving ruling, it isn't just about finding definitive proof. It's about acknowledging that there is more to the story, that the evidence does not align perfectly with the narrative we've been given. The possibility of murder, while unsettling, remains a theory that cannot be easily dismissed given the circumstances and the forensic details surrounding Kurt Cobain's death. And it's really interesting. So many people know that he killed himself, but not many people know about these inconsistencies. All these forensic inconsistencies have been known about for decades, and most people I talk to don't even know a clue about them. It's just crazy. The media hooked on to the story that the Seattle Police Department gave them immediately, which was the unaliving theory, within hours of finding him. And the world just took it and ran. And the Seattle Police Department closed the freaking file and were like, yeah, that's it. He killed himself. In addition to the physical and forensic evidence, several pieces of circumstantial evidence have raised doubts about the nature of Kurt's death. While circumstantial evidence alone may not be enough to reach a definitive conclusion, it contributes to the ongoing debate about what truly happened in the final days of Kurt's life. One of the most curious points involves Kurt's credit card. Someone attempted to use his credit card after the estimated time of death, but before his body was discovered. Despite this alarming detail, the police were unable to identify who attempted to use the card, nor did they pursue it as a lead. This raises questions about whether there was someone else involved who knew about his death before the general public or law enforcement. What are we doing? What are we freaking doing? They're not investigating jack shit. Is that not a little bit suspicious? Does that not at least raise a little bit of a red flag, an orange flag, a yellow flag? I think it's weird that, yeah, Kurt Cobain was dead. No one knew about it, supposedly yet. And yet someone has his credit card and is using it. And they still don't know who the person is, still to this day, because they never fucking looked into it. Okay, so the forensic stuff, pretty undeniable, right? Like, forensics don't lie. Circumstantial evidence, sure, I'll give it to you. It's circumstantial, what can I say? But what about statistics on overdose deaths and suicides by firearms? Understanding this can provide some context for evaluating the likelihood of different scenarios. Studies have shown that the combination of a heroin overdose and unaliving by firearm is exceedingly rare. So the following studies I all gathered from the book Love and Death, just to point that out. They just compiled it so well, and it's crazy to take into account. So according to a study published in the Journal of Medicine, Science, and Law, which reviewed 1,862 post-mortem examinations of unalivings in northwest London over 20 years, 20% of these unalivings resulted from physical injury, including gunshot wounds. However, not a single case involved opiates. Another study conducted in the British county of Avon reviewed 1,117 unalivings, of which 51 involved the use of a shotgun. Again, none of these cases involved the use of opiates. The data points to the rarity, if not the outright myth, of the suicidal heroin addict who would choose to end their life with a firearm after a lethal dose of heroin. Further evidence comes from a study of 189 cases of fatal self-poisoning with opiates in London between 1975 and 1984. Out of these 189 cases, only a single case resulted in a blood morphine level exceeding 1.52 milligrams per liter, which was the same concentration found in Kurt's bloodstream. This means Less than 0.53% of the cases studied reached the levels found in Cobain's blood, indicating that even in the cases of intentional overdose, such a high level is exceptionally rare. So, again, just like I said, it's really interesting to see the statistics on this because this does not happen. It's not likely, it's not a common occurrence. In fact, it's extremely rare. And never say never, but the facts just aren't there. Another crucial point of interest involves a series of audio tapes that shed light on the events surrounding Kurt's death. These tapes were recorded by Tom Grant, that private investigator hired by Courtney to find him after he had gone missing from rehab. And there is no possible way we would be able to go through all these tapes. There is like hours and hours of these tapes. And literally, like I said, we would be here for days going through them. While they are extremely interesting, again, I'm going to refer you to Soaked in Bleach because, God, do they do such a good job laying it out and telling the whole story, including the tapes, the actual recordings. And it's not all of them. The book even goes into more detail about them. But if you want to hear any of them, check it out. Even just like look up clips on YouTube of them. They're so fascinating and so freaking telling. But yeah, I wish I could go through them, but let me know if you want a deep dive and maybe I can cut aside some free time and go into them in in an extra episode or something like that. Just too many to go through. Another perplexing detail revolves around the French doors in the greenhouse where Cobain's body was found. According to the police report, quote, "There are stairs on the west side leading to the French door entry and another set of French doors on the east side leading to the balcony. The doors are unlocked and closed, but there is a stool with a box of gardening supplies on it in front of the door." End quote. This is the set of doors that leads to the balcony. The one that has the stool with the box of gardening supplies on it in front of the door. That goes to the balcony, not the entrance from the stairs. However, later reports inconsistently claimed that the stool was wedged up against the doorknob, blocking the entrance doorway, which clearly, from the police report, stated word for word, this was not the case. They were across the room at the other doorway. That doesn't even lead to stairs or anything. It just leads to a balcony. John Fisk, a paramedic on the scene, vehemently stated that the stool was not blocking the door at all, and he did not know where that claim originated. So it's proven through the police report that Kurt did not barricade himself in the greenhouse, despite what Seattle Police Sergeant Cameron states. Cameron still refuses to answer why he told this lie to this day. It's a straight up lie. This inconsistency in the reports suggests a lack of thorough documentation and raises questions about the reliability of the Seattle Police Department's investigation. Adding to the suspicion is the fact that the French doors to the greenhouse were reportedly locked from the inside. Curious, right? This was used to suggest that Cobain must have locked himself in before taking his own life. However, Tom Grant demonstrated that the door had a simple twist lock, not a deadbolt. This meant that anyone could have locked the door from the inside and then closed it without needing a key. This detail casts doubt on the police's conclusion of suicide, as it opens up the possibility that someone else could have been present in the greenhouse and locked the door after leaving. Taken together, these pieces of circumstantial evidence add layers of complexity to an already controversial case. From the unexpected use of Cobain's credit card after his death to the discrepancies in police reports, there are numerous factors that challenge the simple conclusion of unaliving. While none of the evidence is definitive on its own, the accumulation of inconsistencies and unanswered questions makes it clear that the case of Kurt Cobain's death is anything but settled. Okay, so I also wanted to go into the inconsistencies in the investigation and pretty much exactly how Seattle Police Department was handling the case. The Seattle Police Department has faced significant criticism for its handling of Kurt Cobain's death investigation. From the outset, the department quickly ruled Cobain's death a suicide by self-inflicted gunshot wound without conducting a thorough investigation. I hope you agree with that after going through everything that we've gone through so far. This hasty conclusion has led to accusations of negligence and a lack of due diligence. Critics argue that the police failed to properly secure the crime scene, collect and analyze all potential evidence, or consider alternative explanations for Cobain's death. The decision to treat the case as an open and shut unaliving rather than a possible homicide or even just a death investigation has been heavily criticized. Several key pieces of evidence in Cobain's case were either overlooked or mishandled by the investigators. Basic forensic protocols, such as fully examining the physical evidence, were not followed. For instance, the lead investigator decided not to develop the photographs from the crime scene because they don't develop film from suicides. This decision has been widely condemned by forensic experts like Vernon J. Gerberth, who stated that all film should be developed fully in every case. The premature judgment to rule Cobain's death a suicide without thorough investigation has led many to question whether crucial evidence of foul play was missed in those critical early hours. The Seattle Police Department's handling of Cobain's death investigation has been further criticized for several negligent actions. Cobain's body was cremated just 6 days after it was discovered, significantly limiting further forensic examination. This blows my mind. It should have been a death investigation and he should not have been cremated because he is the biggest piece of evidence, and they got rid of him. The police waited 30 days to process the shotgun for fingerprints and ultimately gave the shotgun back to Courtney Love, who had it melted down. Tell me you're a part of this without telling me you're a part of this. Additionally, the greenhouse crime scene was torn down and destroyed shortly after the investigation, preventing any potential re-examination of the site. Again, insane. Why are we getting rid of everything? This is when I start thinking like the Seattle Police Department is covering something up, because why are they getting rid of all this evidence within like a month of it happening? I've never heard of this. These actions have been condemned by experts like Vernon J. Gerberth, like I mentioned, who argue that they are not standard practices in death investigations and indicate a lack of proper protocol. At the very least, geez, it's just insane. It is literally just insane to me. I don't have words. If God forbid something like this happened to someone that you know, I feel like you wouldn't stand for this. It just seems all too convenient. Going back to when Kurt was missing, at least 5 people, including Seattle police officers, visited Cobain's Lake Washington house, searching for him during daylight hours, and failed to see his body in the greenhouse. This oversight has raised serious questions about the thoroughness and competence of the search efforts. The fact that Cobain's body was not discovered sooner implies a lack of proper search protocols and suggests that his death might have been preventable had more rigorous procedures been followed. The extraordinary level of heroin in Cobain's system has prompted experts to question the official ruling of unaliving. Dr. Vincent DeMaio, a renowned forensic pathologist and member of the American Academy of Forensic Science, has noted that no studies have definitively linked heroin use with an increased incidence of suicide. DeMaio's perspective underscores the need for a thorough re-examination of Cobain's autopsy results and the broader investigation into his death. The high heroin levels suggest an immediate, overwhelming effect that would have rendered Cobain unable to complete the tasks necessary to stage his own suicide as described. The lack of transparency from the medical examiner's office, which has yet to make Cobain's full autopsy report public, further complicates the issue. Access to this report could provide critical insights into the toxicological findings and other forensic details that might clarify the exact circumstances of Kurt's death. Without it, significant questions remain unanswered, fueling ongoing speculation and doubt about the true nature of Cobain's demise. These questions highlight the necessity for a more comprehensive and transparent investigation to address the inconsistencies and provide closure to Cobain's family, friends, and fans. So that's the investigation, the forensics, the circumstantial evidence, all of that. Again, none of it is adding up for me, but I'd like to hear what you guys think about it, because everyone has their own opinion on it, and we None of us truly know what actually happened. So, the only thing that could truly help is a re-investigation into the case that is transparent, comprehensive, and thorough. The discovery of Kurt Cobain's body on April 8, 1994 was followed by a media frenzy, with numerous reports and speculations circulating rapidly. One widely disseminated piece of misinformation concerned Cobain's driver's license. The media grossly misinterpreted this detail. Numerous outlets reported that Cobain had deliberately left out his driver's license exposed, suggesting it was a premeditated act to ensure he would be recognized after his death. This narrative fits neatly into the tragic storyline of a rock star's unaliving, reinforcing to the general public the perception that Cobain had meticulously planned out his final moments. The reality, as documented in the police reports, was far less dramatic, but equally important in understanding the nuances of the scene. This instance of media misinformation is significant because it demonstrates how easily facts can be distorted, leading to widespread misconceptions. These erroneous reports paint a picture of his last actions that were not supported by the evidence. Such inaccuracies not only mislead the public, but also complicate efforts to discern the truth. When key details are misreported, it becomes challenging to piece together an accurate account of events, especially in high-profile cases where emotions and speculation run high. Furthermore, the persistence of these inaccuracies highlights the importance of careful, critical analysis of media reports, especially in cases involving potential foul play. The distortion of facts surrounding Cobain's driver's license serves as a cautionary tale about the need for thorough, unbiased reporting. It underscores the necessity for law enforcement and the media to communicate clearly and accurately, ensuring that the public receives a truthful representation of events rather than a sensationalized version that obscures the truth. Adding to the complexity of the case are the marital troubles between Cobain and Courtney Love. The couple was reportedly in the midst of a divorce, and Cobain was drawing up a new will that would significantly alter the financial arrangements of their separation. Given their prenuptial agreement, Love stood to receive a minimal settlement if the divorce was finalized. However, upon Cobain's death, she inherited an estate worth more than $1 billion in future royalties. This financial incentive has been pointed to by some as a potential motive, further complicating the narrative and underscoring the need for a more comprehensive investigation into Kurt's death. Courtney Love has been a figure of intense scrutiny in the narrative surrounding Kurt's death. Leading up to his tragic end, Love's behavior and actions have been viewed with suspicion by some, adding layers to the already complex story. In the weeks preceding his death, Love hired private investigator Tom Grant to find Cobain after he left a rehab facility in LA and went missing. Love's actions and statements have drawn criticism and suspicion. According to Grant, who later publicly shared his findings and doubts, Love provided inconsistent and sometimes misleading information during his investigation. Her erratic behavior, including publicly airing personal grievances and making provocative statements, contributed to the perception of her as a volatile figure. Following Kurt's death, Love's actions continued to raise eyebrows. She read portions of Kurt's suicide note to a crowd of mourners in a manner some perceive as theatrical and self-serving. Additionally, her handling of Cobain's estate and her subsequent public and legal battles have kept her in the spotlight, further feeding the narrative of controversy surrounding her. Theories about Courtney Love's potential involvement or knowledge of foul play in Cobain's death have circulated widely, particularly in the realm of true crime enthusiasts and conspiracy theorists. Some believe that Love had a motive to orchestrate Cobain's death, citing their tumultuous relationship and the substantial financial and legal benefits she received following his passing. These allegations are heavily featured in the documentary Soaked in Bleach, where Tom Grant lays out his suspicions and the circumstantial evidence he believes points to foul play. Additionally, skeptics question Love's rapid and assertive actions following Cobain's death, including her immediate focus on managing his estate and legacy. Some see this as an attempt to control the narrative and deflect scrutiny. Furthermore, Love's alleged involvement in a scheme to hire someone to stage a burglary at the Cobain home just days before his death has been cited as suspicious behavior that warrants further investigation. While there is no concrete evidence proving Love's involvement in any foul play, the inconsistencies and peculiarities in her behavior, both before and after Kurt's death, have kept speculation alive. These lingering doubts contribute to the ongoing fascination and controversy surrounding the tragic end of Kurt Cobain, ensuring that the full truth, if it exists, remains elusive. My thoughts on Courtney: she allegedly had something to do with it. I don't go into it a lot here. Just like I said, there's just too much. But if you watch the documentary, you'll see what I mean. There's just too many weird circumstances and very damning tapes of her and recordings of her. She had to have something to do with it. Something. That's my opinion, though. Nine days before his body was discovered, Kurt Cobain purchased a Remington M11 shotgun in response to a recent burglary. This purchase was a precautionary measure taken to ensure his safety, and the shotgun was registered to his friend Dylan Carlson, likely to avoid attention due to Cobain's high profile. That same day, Cobain flew from Seattle to LA, a trip intended to check into a rehab clinic, signaling his continued struggle with substance abuse and his attempts to seek help. On March 31st, 1994, Cobain was at the Exodus Rehab Clinic in LA. During his stay, he received a visit from his nanny, Jackie Ferry, and his daughter, Frances Bean Cobain. This visit suggested some semblance of normalcy and support from those close to him. However, his interactions with Courtney Love were tumultuous. Love made 13 unanswered calls to Cobain that day, a fact she later downplayed by claiming to Tom Grant that she had only made one call. This discrepancy raised questions about her actions and state of mind during this critical period. On April 1st, 1994, Cobain abruptly left the rehab facility and flew back to Seattle. Notably, he chose not to reunite with Courtney Love, who was only 10 miles away in LA at the time. This decision to avoid Love hinted at ongoing marital strife and his desire for solitude or escape from their turbulent relationship. Cobain's sudden departure from rehab and decision to return to Seattle marked the beginning of a series of mysterious and concerning events leading up to his death. The following day, April 2nd, 1994, Cobain was seen by Michael, or Callie DeWitt, the couple's live-in nanny, and Callie's girlfriend at Cobain's Lake Washington home. According to Callie, this was the last time he saw Cobain. Phone records indicate that Courtney Love spoke to Callie 8 times on April 2nd, yet she did not disclose that Cobain had been seen when she hired Tom Grant on April 3rd. This omission raised further speculations about her transparency and intentions during the days leading up to Kurt's death. These interactions and movements during the final days of Cobain's life paint a picture of a man in turmoil, seeking both connection and isolation, grappling with personal demons and the pressures from his closest relationships. In 2014, the 20th anniversary of Kurt Cobain's death, the Seattle Police Department took the opportunity to re-examine the files. Led by Detective Mike Cienski, the review maintained the original ruling of unaliving, despite numerous inconsistencies that have been overlooked. The re-examination of the files and the conclusion drawn by Detective Cienski did little to quell the suspicions surrounding Kurt's death. Just 3 months after these statements, Kathleen O'Toole was confirmed as Seattle's new chief of police. Her appointment came with a mandate to address significant issues within the department, including allegations of excessive force and biased policing, as reported by the Seattle Times on June 23, 2014. This context of a beleaguered police department under scrutiny added another layer of complexity to the public's trust in the investigation's integrity and thoroughness. Given the historical mishandling of the initial investigation and the department's tarnished reputation, there have been strong calls for a reinvestigation of Cobain's death. Critics argue that the Seattle Police Department, given its past performance and internal challenges, is not the appropriate body to conduct this reinvestigation. I completely agree. Instead, they demand that an objective set of experts, free from the department's biases and procedural shortcomings, be brought in to thoroughly and transparently re examine the evidence and circumstances surrounding Kurt's death. Until such an independent reinvestigation is conducted, many believe it's premature and irresponsible to definitively label Cobain's death a clear-cut unaliving. The demand for a fresh perspective underscores the enduring quest for truth and justice, driven by the hundreds of unanswered questions and perceived anomalies in the official narrative of Kurt Cobain's tragic demise. And this is just the sentiment anyone would have if it was their loved one. Why would we accept this for anyone at all? We absolutely should not. Kurt Cobain's influence on his generation and beyond cannot be overstated. His music persona and the raw authenticity he brought to his art resonated deeply with countless fans who saw him as a spokesperson for their own struggles and disillusionments. Cobain's untimely death in 1994 not only marked the end of an era in music, but also had a tragic ripple effect that extended far beyond the immediate shock and mourning. To this date, there have been at least 68 known cases of copycat suicides directly related to the death of Kurt Cobain. These tragic incidents underscores the profound impact Cobain had on his fans, many of whom felt a deep connection to him and were devastated by his loss. The Seattle Police Department's decision to quickly rule his death an unaliving without thoroughly investigating other potential explanations may have inadvertently contributed to the phenomenon of copycat unalivings. For many of Cobain's fans, the narrative of their idol succumbing to his struggles with mental health and addiction became a grim and influential part of his legacy. The romanticization of his tragic end could have been mitigated or perhaps avoided altogether if the investigation into his death had been more rigorous and conclusive. If Cobain's death had been treated as a full-scale death investigation from the start, rather than being hastily categorized as an unaliving, it might have provided a different perspective for those struggling with similar issues. The possibility of foul play or a more nuanced understanding of the circumstances surrounding his death could have altered the narrative that many of his fans internalized. This in turn might have prevented some of the subsequent tragedies. The 68 known cases of copycat unalivings are a stark reminder of the responsibility that comes with how such high-profile deaths are reported and investigated. Cobain's death should serve as a crucial lesson in the importance of thorough, unbiased investigations and sensitive media reporting. The way we address and understand the deaths of influential figures can have far-reaching consequences, particularly for vulnerable individuals who look up to them. Ensuring that investigations are exhaustive and transparent is not only a matter of justice for the deceased, but also a protective measure for those who might be influenced by the way these cases are portrayed. The legacy of Kurt Cobain, while marked by incredible musical contributions, is also a somber reminder of the real-world impact that celebrities can have on their fans, especially in moments of profound loss. That's the thing, it's not just about Kurt Cobain, it's his fans. Same thing goes for anyone in this sort of situation. Chester Bennington, Mac Miller, Chris Cornell, Avicii, and literally countless other celebrities not even in the music space. That loss affects so many people more than we could ever imagine, probably. So it's just such a delicate topic that I feel like the media doesn't understand that they really drop the ball on too. They're so excited to get like the crazy story out. And make headlines or whatever, but people's lives are at stake in many, many, many of these cases. So it's just so sad to see. And it's going to keep happening because that's how the media is. But it's honestly just so tragic. Kurt Cobain's influence on music and pop culture is truly profound and enduring. He not only helped define the grunge movement of the early 1990s, but also gave a voice to a generation grappling with issues of identity, disillusionment, and anxiety. His raw emotional lyrics and the band's gritty sound resonates deeply with listeners, making Nirvana a cultural phenomenon and Cobain an icon of his time. Songs like Smells Like Teen Spirit, Come As You Are, and Lithium became anthems for a youth, cementing Cobain's legacy as a pivotal figure in rock history. Despite his untimely death in 1994, Kurt's impact continues to be felt across the music industry and beyond. His influence can be seen in the work of countless artists who cite him as a major inspiration. Cobain's life and career have been the subject of numerous documentaries, books, and scholarly analysis, reflecting the ongoing fascination with his artistic genius and troubled existence. The circumstances surrounding Kurt Cobain's death remain a topic of intense debate and public interest. While his death was officially ruled an unaliving, many people, including me, believe that there are so many inconsistencies and so many unanswered questions that suggest foul play. The discussion around his death is not just about solving a mystery. It's about understanding the complexities of Cobain's life, his struggles with fame, addiction, mental health, and marriage, and how these factors may have contributed to his tragic end. From the inconsistencies in the physical evidence and the missteps in the police investigation to the unexplained levels of heroin in his system and the anomalies surrounding his suicide note, there are numerous elements that cast doubt on the official ruling of unaliving. These inconsistencies demand a more thorough examination to address the lingering questions that continue to fuel speculation and controversy. Kurt Cobain's passing was not just a loss for the music world, but a deeply personal tragedy that affected his family, friends, and fans. The emotional weight of his struggles and the mysterious circumstances of his demise highlights the need for a compassionate and diligent pursuit of the truth, honoring Cobain's legacy and the profound influence he had on so many lives. The more I dive into the tragic case of Kurt Cobain's death, I am continually struck by the unresolved questions and inconsistencies that surround it. Despite the official ruling, the number of inconsistencies and overlooked investigative steps suggests that the truth might be far more complex. This is not just about challenging the status quo. It's about seeking justice and clarity for a figure who profoundly influenced an entire generation. Cobain's music and legacy deserve to be remembered without the shadows of doubt and mystery that currently cloud the circumstances of his death. In my opinion, one of the most compelling aspects of this case is the toxicology report. There has never been a documented instance in the history of law enforcement where an individual with the level of heroin found in Cobain's system could remain conscious, let alone capable of orchestrating their own unaliving. The notion that Cobain could inject a lethal dose of heroin, not even just a lethal dose, 3 times the lethal dose, neatly put away his drug paraphernalia, and then proceed to handle a shotgun defies medical and forensic logic. The saying, if you want to get away with murder, you kill a junkie, is disturbingly relevant here, highlighting how preconceived notions about drug addiction can obscure the truth and prevent thorough investigations. For those who are passionate about uncovering the truth and understanding the full scope of this tragedy, I strongly encourage you to watch the documentary Soaked in Bleach. This film meticulously examines the various inconsistencies and presents evidence that challenges the official conclusions. It provides a platform for viewers to critically analyze the case and form their own informed opinions. In the end, continuing to seek the truth in Cobain's case is of paramount importance. It's about honoring his legacy with the respect and thoroughness it deserves. By questioning the official narrative and demanding comprehensive investigations, we not only pay tribute to Cobain, but also set a precedent for how we handle similar cases in the future. Ensuring justice and truth are served is the best way to honor the impact Kurt Cobain had on music, culture, and the countless lives he touched. Gosh, yeah, that's the case of Kurt Cobain. I don't know, I'm finding myself speechless right now just because it's just crazy to me. I guess the part that really just gets me the most is the jumping to conclusions by the investigators. Because, I see this so often in other cases where it's not even necessarily an unaliving, but maybe homicide or maybe just a disappearance. Actually, in disappearances, it happens all the freaking time. But I think the reason why I'm so passionate about this case is it's such a glaring case about the preconceived ideas that some law enforcement come up with, I think it's a complete injustice. I think we don't talk about it enough. I think it happens way more than we think. In fact, I know it happens way more than we think. And I just believe passionately that this is something that we should be aware of more often. I always think in a lot of these, missing person cases or homicide cases, if that was a loved one, I'd be raising hell to get a fair and thorough investigation done. And we shouldn't have to worry about that. Law enforcement is there to do their jobs correctly, to have due diligence in these cases. And don't get me wrong, I'm sure there are a lot of amazing agencies out there, a lot of amazing investigators and whatnot. But there is a large number who are just completely and utterly shitty. It's just sad. It's sad that we have to worry about this, and it's sad that it happens. But yeah, I think that's why I am so deeply concerned with the Kurt Cobain case, because justice was not served. And for such a huge star he was, that couldn't even save him. So I can't even think what would happen to Joe Schmo, Kind of rambling, but hopefully you understand my perspective. So yeah, that's all I've got for you guys today. This case literally always gets me fired up because, like I said, I'm a huge fan of Kurt Cobain and Nirvana. And I truly do believe that there is more to what the investigators think. But I don't know. I doubt, honestly, right now it would ever get reopened again. But what do you guys think? Do you really think it is just as cut and dry as the Seattle Police Department thinks? Or do you think he was murdered? Or do you simply think that he at least deserves a fair death investigation? Like me. I'm curious, so let me know down in the comments. Also, if you made it this far along, leave me this emoji in the comments. And don't forget to give this video a like. And if you aren't already, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Also, if you're listening on any audio platform, make sure to give us a review. It would really help us out. Thank you so much for your support. I'm Rachel, and until next time, stay weird and stay wicked. Bye.